though he's surrounded by people, Russ Cook knows a thing or two about running your own race. The hardest geezer, as he calls himself, has completed what has got to be one of the hardest athletic feats. Cook is the first person to run the length of Africa. The 27-year-old Briton started in South Africa on April 22nd of last year and covered more than 9,940 miles along the west coast of the continent. He averaged more than 28 miles per day, 2 miles longer than a marathon every day. Cook and his team were held up and robbed in Angola. He reportedly got food poisoning at one point and had some trouble getting into Algeria because he didn't have a visa. But after 352 grueling days, he reached the end of his journey, the northern tip of Tunisia, along with a bunch of folks he invited to finish the race with him. In doing this, the exhausted but elated Cook raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for 2 charities. A marathon plus every day for a year. Gonna be tough for anyone to eclipse that. And for millions of Americans, it's gonna be tough to eclipse the celestial sight they saw yesterday when a total solar eclipse moved like a belt across the east central part of the country. It's the last time something like this will occur in the contiguous US for 20 years.
After all the excitement leading up to this day, we were finally able to witness the total solar eclipse and those 4 minutes and 25 seconds of darkness that came with it. People traveled from around the country and also the world, and it's a moment no one will soon forget. Awe on the faces of children and adults alike as the moon blocked the sun, briefly casting the earth in darkness. It's an event as rare as it is beautiful, with the sun's corona visible only to those lucky enough to be in the path of totality.
We're the only planet in the solar system that this is true for. The apparent size of the moon in our sky is the same as the apparent size of the sun in the sky.
In the hours leading up to the eclipse, communities hosted parties to celebrate their geographic good fortune. Scientists taking advantage of those precious 3 to 4 minutes to unlock more clues into our planet and beyond.
Better understanding what's happening at the corona at the start of the action helps us to not only model and predict what could happen in the future, but better protect our spacecraft from space weather events and life on Earth, like our power grids and our communication systems.
The science, the spectacle, the serenity of the moment. The next total solar eclipse visible from the contiguous United States will occur in August of 2044.
On this date in world history. On April 9, 2003, U.S. Marines and Iraqis toppled a statue of Saddam Hussein in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. It symbolized the end of the Iraqi leader's regime and happened less than a month after a U.S.-led coalition of countries attacked the Middle Eastern nation. Hussein himself was captured in December of 2003, but the conflict in Iraq would continue for years afterward. On this date in 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant in Appomattox, Virginia. It marked the beginning of the end of the American Civil War, though sporadic fighting went on for months until hostilities formally ended. An audio recording history was made on April 9, 1860. A French inventor named Edouard Léon Scott de Martinville used something called a phonautograph to record himself singing a folk song. It couldn't be played back at the time, but his device was the first that could record vibrations of sound onto a surface.
Word of knowledge. Which of these South American countries doesn't border Brazil? Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay. There are only 2 countries in the continent that don't border Brazil. One is Chile and the other is Ecuador.
Tensions are soaring between Mexico and Ecuador. Part of the rift centers on a former Ecuadorian vice president named Jorge Glass. After his term in office, Glass was found guilty of corruption. He was imprisoned for taking more than $13 million in bribes. A judge freed Glass in 2022, but corruption investigations continued, and in December, the former Ecuadorian vice president moved into the Mexican embassy in Ecuador. He said the legal proceedings against him were politically motivated, and Mexico apparently agreed, granting Glass political asylum, which means he'd be allowed to stay and protected on Mexican soil. But this angered Ecuador, which says it doesn't discriminate based on politics and that it wouldn't allow glass to leave Ecuador for Mexico. Then, something unusual happened. Ecuadorian authorities forced their way into the Mexican embassy Friday and arrested glass. Even though the Mexican embassy is located in Ecuador, it's considered Mexican territory. This is how foreign embassies are traditionally treated around the world. It's very rare for a country's military or law enforcement to storm another's embassy. So many Latin American leaders criticized Ecuador's government, saying its raid violated rules about embassies. Ecuador accused Mexico of interfering with the investigation into glass by allowing him to stay in the Mexican embassy. Many Ecuadorians supported the move to arrest their former vice president. Mexico has closed its embassy in Ecuador. Next, when it comes to fashion, the use of pesticides in farming materials, the use of water in dyeing them, and the plastics and microfiber cloth, they're all reasons why the United Nations considers the industry to be one of the world's biggest polluters. Fast fashion, cheap clothes worn a few times and then thrown out, is considered a big part of the problem. Recycling could be part of the solution, but cheap textiles don't work as well for this, and some consumers don't want to buy new clothes from recycled cloth.
Loads and loads of discarded textiles, all ready for recycling. But just like with laundry, first comes sorting. The task is often done manually, but sifting through textiles by hand, it's complicated and time-consuming.
So we need to sort, and we need to do it fast, and we need to do it with a great accuracy, and that has to be done automatically.
This automated textile facility in southern Sweden definitely speeds the job along. It's Siptex, Swedish innovation platform for textile sorting. A bale of clothes is dropped into the machine. Then items are distributed evenly on conveyor belts.
It's here we feed in all the materials, and then they're gonna pass through 4 different cleaning processes where you try to sort out the different fabrics.
Textiles pass under near-infrared and visual spectroscopy sensors. High-tech also used in plastics recycling. The sensors help sort out items by fiber and color. The textiles are illuminated and the light reflects in different ways depending on the material. Compressed air then blows the fabric into the proper container.
So what we have in the end are bales with a certain purity. For example, 95% cotton.
The facility is capable of sorting 1/3 of Sweden's annual textile waste. The next step is getting clothing companies to start using circulated materials in products instead of new materials.
So I think that it will be step by step.
The European Parliament voted to adopt recommendations for a new sustainable and circular textile strategy.
It's a widespread idea that recycling of fibers is equal to circular economy, but circular economy demands that you have very high quality textiles, very high quality products that can be recycled again and again for a very long time, which we don't have at the moment. So what we're doing now is that we're taking very low quality textiles and products and turning them into some new low quality textiles, which doesn't make sense.
But we can't just blame clothing producers. After all, supply is driven by demand, and consumers have choices to make as well.
2 states, at least partially in the path of yesterday's eclipse, are on today's World of Viewers. The Hoosier state of Indiana is first. Great to have Mrs. Wells' class watching there at Morgan Township Middle High School. It's in the city of Valparaiso. And from the Granite State of New Hampshire, hello to Mrs. Burt's class. Dover Middle School is in the city of Dover. Police tweets you probably don't see every day. If you are missing some hogs, they are running at large. Try and collect them as soon as possible. That was the alert. This is the result. An officer in Utah trying to pen up a pig on the lam. Like a Limberley linebacker, the cop quickly captures the suspect. He reportedly said he'd done this before. Though the animal was squealing in protest, it will be taken to a pig rescue facility. So even though it went hog wild, no one's bringing home the bacon. Its feet won't be pickled, the ham won't be hocked, the pork won't be chopped, the rinds won't be brined, no one's gonna swine and dine, the other white meat won't meet pork and knife, the squeaky squeal won't get the grease. So it is still a day no pigs would die, at least not that one. I'm Carl Azus, pigging out on puns and rooting for you to join us again for the world from A to Z. You mean the world to me.